Greetings, Japan fans. In today's show, we have a very special interview with Dominic Carter, an entrepreneur who started his business from nothing, has really built it up over many years here in Japan. He has a very interesting background, and what his company does is also very interesting. And he makes some really excellent points about dealing well with people, especially dealing well with Japanese people, and gives us a lot of good hints and a lot of wisdom about how we can create the right type of culture in our businesses to be successful. Maishu, arigatou gozaimasu, and welcome back to the Leadership Japan series. I'm your host in Tokyo, Dr. Greg Story, your corporate coaching and training guy, president of Dale Carnegie Train Japan, the best-selling author, Japan Sales Mastery, and my new bestseller, Japan Business Mastery. We are broadcasting around the world from Minato-ku in the center of Tokyo, the leadership capital of Japan. This podcast brings insights, examples, and experience about leading in Japan, and trust me, it is different here. If you have feedback on the show or have preferences about potential future topics, then leave us your comments. Don't forget to rate, review, subscribe, and share this podcast. Here are our daily podcast lineup programs on iTunes. Mondays, the Cutting Edge Japan Business Show. Tuesdays, the Presentation Japan series. Wednesdays, the Sales Japan series. Thursdays, this one, the Leadership Japan series. Fridays, the Japan Business Mastery Show. And before we get going, today's handy Japanese phrase, and this happens to me sometimes when I'm speaking in Japanese, and I say something and then everyone starts laughing, and in that situation you want to ask, well, what are you laughing at? So you say, "Nani ga son ni okashi no? Nani ga son ni okashi no? Nani ga son ni okashi no? Nani ga son ni okashi no?" So what's funny? Did I say something funny? What was funny? "Nani ga son ni okashi no? Nani ga son ni okashi no? Nani ga son ni okashi no?" Oh, did I say something funny? "Nani ga son ni okashi no?" So that is a useful phrase that I need to use myself, because sometimes speaking in Japanese, you say things often from an English-speaking context, but in Japanese, and it sounds very funny to Japanese people, or you use a particular word the wrong way, or you mix up particular words that sound the same, and everyone thinks it's hilarious. Well, this is episode number 337, and today we're talking about 5 guiding principles to create the right culture. Welcome to this edition of Japan's top business interviews. It is my great pleasure to have an old friend of mine, Dominic Carter from Carter Group, as the guest today to talk about leadership in Japan. Dominic, great to see you again.
Nice to see you, Greg.
Thank you for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
So, Dominic, you're very well known, so I'm sure everyone knows you, but for the few people out there who don't, can you talk a little bit about your background and basically how you got to where you are today? Why are you doing this in Japan? How did you get here? In brief, just give us a bit of background and talk a little bit about Carter Group.
Okay, well, I'm from Australia, and I originally, I haven't been very creative in my career in some respects because I studied marketing and Japanese studies at university. And when I left university, I started working in a market research agency in Sydney.
And when you say university, that was in which university in Australia?
New South Wales University in Sydney.
So they had marketing and Japanese?
Yes, it was part of a Bachelor of Commerce degree. Okay. And so they've been my great interests, actually, ever since I was a teenager, is marketing and Japan and Japanese. So it was a natural thing for me to study. And I started working, though, and then 3 years in to my job there, the people who ran that business decided they were going to open up an office in Tokyo, and I put my hand up for that, and they set me up there on a bit of a lark to see how he goes. I remember my boss told me, "You can come home if it doesn't work." But in any case, I came up here and took over what was a failing licensee relationship and built that business with my team over the next 4 years.
So that was an existing business that you took over or established from zero?
We had a licensed relationship with another market research agency up here.
Right, so nothing on the ground here from your point of view. They're already established, but they're providing that service for you.
Yes. So my mission essentially was to take over the clients and build the business from there as a fully owned office.
So why the interest in Japan, and marketing? I mean, that's fairly unique to have that double interest. Why Japan?
When I was a kid, my family had to sit down and watch The Sullivans every weeknight. If you remember, this was a drama that was set during the war. And of course, when I was very young, I had no idea about that. I had no idea about Japan and so on and so forth. And so that was my first introduction to the idea of Japan, was from sort of wartime drama. And then, of course, when I was a teenager, Japan had become very successful, and there were many Japanese cars on the streets, and we were also getting a lot of Japanese tourists into Australia. And where I went to school is in Milsons Point in Sydney, which is right on the harbour. So from my classroom, I could see every day busloads of Japanese tourists coming by and getting out and taking photos. And where we did physical education class and went for runs, we were always coming across Japanese people who were always very, very well dressed, I remember. And I was just fascinated just by how neat these people were and how well put together they were, and how, I guess, sort of mysterious they seemed as well. And it seemed like there were a lot of rules and things in their culture that were kind of not really very easy to understand for a young Australian kid. So I started reading up everything I could on Japan, and when I finished school, I chose a major in Japanese studies.
And so you come up to Japan, there's an existing license agreement, and so you take over the clients. How did that go? I mean, it was very rocky.
I thought that might be the case. Yes, so there was a lot of opposition to me playing that role of taking over the clients, but it was something that needed to happen because the servicing on the ground wasn't really up to what the international standard needed to be.
And were you a one-man band at that time? You sort of came in like the Lone Ranger and cleaned up town? Or?
We took one person from the licensee company, and we kind of worked together, and then she left after 6 months, and I kept on going. But initially, for hiring staff, the old licensee was a pretty good source of people, so that kind of helped in the beginning.
And so at what point into the transition here did you decide there is a viable business here, I don't have to go home and give up, we can actually make this work, I want to stay here and make it work? Well, how long did that decision take?
It was an interesting point in time because our clients were expanding at the same time that we wanted to expand as well. And at that time, we had a very significant relationship with Unilever. And at that time, they had decided to increase their investment in TV advertising very significantly. And that meant a lot more work for us because our speciality in that agency at that time was testing and tracking TV advertising.
And what was the name of the agency at that time?
Millward Brown.
Millward Brown, okay.
Yes.
So how long were you with Millward Brown?
I was with them for 4 years in Japan and 3 years in Australia, so 7 years overall.
And the 4 years in Japan, at the end of that time, how many people were working for you?
I had 20 people working for me.
And you hired all of them?
I'd hired all of them. Yep. So we got it up to 1 billion yen in 4 years.
Yeah. And how much is that in US dollars for those listeners who don't know?
That's about $10 million.
$10 million,
yeah,
right?
Yeah.
And so we think about, you've got 20 people all hired by you, you're leading the team. And today we're in Carter Group, headquarters here. So where was the transition from that company to this company?
Well, it took a lot longer after starting my own business to reach the same level of turnover.
How long before you was it 4 years later you decided to go independent?
I finished up with Millward Brown, and then within 6 months I was back in Japan. I had thought I was going to go home to Australia.
So you actually you handed the business off to somebody else?
Yes.
Back home?
Yes, I gave my notice. I handed the business off. I actually handed in my Gaijin card at the airport too. I didn't think I was coming back to Japan.
Wow, that's really... I'm not coming back. Here's my... I'm not turning up again. Yeah,
yes,
really?
yes.
Wow.
And of course I wished I hadn't done that, because within about 6 months, it seemed that there was some openness to me coming back and coming back into the market by various people. And
as yourself, as your own entity.
Yes. So we did our first project. I did the first project under my own account in late 2003, and we've basically been going in one form or another since then.
So from 2003 to today, how big is the organisation? And if you can talk numbers about revenues.
Yeah.
If you can't, that's fine. Maybe talk percentages. But just to give people an idea, how big is the organisation?
We have about 70 full-time people in the organisation. We have a team of part-timers as well, as we have quite a large field workforce in Osaka. We have 2 offices in Tokyo and Osaka.
I think you've got quite a large number of part-time staff.
Yes, we have about 100.
Right.
We've got quite a large-scale operation down there. So we have about 70 staff. Our turnover is about $13 million at the moment.
So you've got to back up to...
We got to back up, but as I said, it took a long time. I thought it was all because I was so clever that we achieved the results we did so quickly in Millward Brown. But of course, having a big brand behind you makes a big difference in terms of what runs you can put on the board and how quickly you can do that. So it's taken a very long time to achieve a similar scale in the business that we have, but I feel it's a very solid business now.
And so let's talk a little bit about leadership, because you started with one person with Millward Brown, you got it up to 20 people, and now you've got 70 people and 100 part-timers. That's a big animal to grapple with. So what were some of the early challenges or continuing challenges that you found with leading in Japan?
Okay, so it's a huge topic. It's very hard to... So if you come in with the idea that you're going to give orders and people are going to follow your orders to the letter, that's not going to happen in Japan.
Why is that?
People have very strong ideas on how things should be done. So I've always found it useful to talk about what needs to be done rather than how to do it. And that's something that I learned when I first came here. And, for example, people would stay in the office after 5 o'clock. Now, I came from Australia and we would sometimes stay at the office after 5 o'clock, but people would be there 8, 9 o'clock in the evening, which absolutely horrified me. And I'd say that you must not stay at the office. You can't do this. But people didn't basically listen to me at all. And I thought, okay, well, right. So what does this mean? And then I realized very quickly that it was more productive when there were negotiations with Japanese suppliers or Japanese clients, that those negotiations would be carried out by Japanese people in my team rather than myself.
Well, how did that realization come to you?
We had, for example...
Because you're a very good negotiator.
Well, when we took over I would like to think so, but all of my tricks didn't really quite work. And that's something that you find when you come to Japan. So everything that you know and all of your know-how isn't necessarily useful in the way that it is at home. But for example, concrete example, we had a problem with our margins when we were at Millward Brown, because everything is outsourced. Everything was outsourced at that time. So the reason why I had a smaller staff at Millward Brown than I do now is that we do a lot more of the work in-house. But we were outsourcing a lot. But it was to the point where our margins were extremely low. And people elsewhere in the world, in the business, the finance guys in Chicago and so forth, were questioning the the feasibility of the business at the level of margin that we were at. So the only way that we were able to do that was to negotiate better deals with our suppliers. But of course, going in there and saying, well, I would like a better deal, thank you very much, and didn't quite work. And I really struggled with that until we employed a senior Japanese executive who was able to go in and have the right kind of rapport with these people to get them to cooperate. And from my perspective, I didn't really care whether it was me or it was him that had actually achieved that result. It was that we achieved that result. And that's how I've run the business all that time. So it's not about, what I can achieve and what my ego is. I still have an ego, but I've learned to keep that under control. It's what result can be achieved. How do we achieve those results? Generally speaking, I think Japanese have a good sense of how to manage issues among themselves. So as long as the basic objectives of the business are being met, the how you do that is something that I've always found is best to leave to people to work out on their own. Obviously, if they come to me and they actually want advice, I'm happy to give advice, and I have opinions and I give my opinions and so forth. But I've found in general that people have a lot of, surprisingly, even at very young stages, have a lot of wisdom in how to get stuff done. So
it sounds like you've become, by default or by circumstance, a really excellent delegator.
Yes, so probably I do delegate a lot. I mean, my rule on delegation is essentially if someone else can do it, I get them to do it. So if anyone else in my team can handle a meeting or a pitch or a proposal or a presentation, a meeting with a supplier, or whatever it is, if I think that they're able to handle it, I will ask them to handle it. If I think I'm the only person who can give that presentation or do that meeting, then I will do the meeting. I'm very clear on that. I will simply say to them, I'm doing that meeting, leave that one with me. Otherwise, I leave it to my team to do. And the occasions where I will say that are fewer and fewer over time. And my team, of course, is now better than I am at a lot of those things too. So it makes a lot of sense to give them as much freedom as they need in order to deliver the best work that they know how to deliver.
So how many people report to you?
I have it's actually too many direct reports, but I have about 7 or 8 direct reports at the moment.
So you've delegated quite a bit to those 7 or 8 direct reports, and are they in turn delegating down to their team members as well, or are they working till midnight every night, not delegating?
I think they're learning that. They're on a journey. But we have different parts of our business. So we have a quantitative business and we have a qualitative business, 2 different types of market research. They're quite different in some respects in terms of how the projects are run and the types of clients that we have in that. I've got 3 client service directors in the qualitative business. That's where I spend most of my time. And they're learning how to build a team and structure a team, and I'm giving them more responsibility and leaving them with more of the decisions.
A lot of times when people try delegation, it doesn't work.
Mm-hmm.
So they say, well, delegation doesn't work. It doesn't work. Delegate. If you want something done, got to do it yourself. Typical mantra, right? So how do you go about delegating to get people to actually sign on and take the accountability?
Well, delegation, I think it's important to realise that when you delegate something, you still need to know what the person's actually doing. Mm-hmm. So delegation is not just dividing work up and passing it among people. You actually have to understand what the process is that person needs to go through to deliver what it is they need to deliver. Because if you don't understand that process, you don't know how to check whether they're actually doing their job or not. Now, the advantage for me has always been that I've done everyone's job in market research. I've interviewed people door to door. I've chased people down in shopping centres in Parramatta and Sydney. I've moderated focus groups, done interviews. I've done intense data analysis, reporting, charting, presenting, all of that, cross-tabbing, all of that kind of stuff I've done myself. So I know what these jobs are. So I can tell very quickly whether someone's actually on track to deliver what it is that they need to deliver when they need to deliver it.
So, Dominic, for delegation, a lot of people resist it. I'm already busy. Why am I doing your work? How do you persuade them?
Do you want to be working 7 days a week? Is that your vision of the future for the next 20 years of your career? So I generally put it to them quite bluntly like that. But there are obvious organisational benefits to delegation as well, because you end up having a team that has skills and has experienced themselves actually taking on challenges. If you don't delegate, the team is never actually going to develop. So I think there's a personal self-interest there, and there's also the interest of building an organisation by not just holding on to everything.
And do they pass that on?
Yes, I think I'm working, not all of some of my team are better at delegating than others, put it that way. And sometimes there are things that they delegate that they oughtn't to delegate. And again, that goes in the department probably of things that they don't know so well, or delegating it to somebody who doesn't actually quite have the knowledge to take on the task that's been delegated. But for the most part, I'm happy with the way that people are developing in their delegation skills. I think it's very important to do that. Otherwise, the company is going to have an awful time growing. Well, you need to, when you delegate something, ideally, you need to know what the person you've delegated to is doing. If you don't do that, it's very hard to check. And when you do delegate, you have to check in through the process. So if you wait until a task is supposed to be done to check whether it's been done or not, generally speaking, that hasn't worked for me. I like to check in maybe a third of the way through, halfway through, 3/4 of the way through, to check that whether those tasks are being done or not. These are the types of things I'm telling my people, because I'm not delegating in that way on a daily basis. But delegation doesn't mean that you're not aware of what's going on. So you need to be aware of what's going on. Micromanaging is a different situation. There are times when you need to micromanage. So when a project's going south, you need to micromanage it. Otherwise, the likelihood is that there's not going to be a good outcome. So you do need to know when it is that you need to step in, but you also need to know when you need to step back and not micromanage. But whenever you delegate something, you have to know whether and how successfully those jobs are being carried out. Otherwise, that's not management. You're not managing anything. You're just flinging work around. So that I think is the difference. So you still have to have the knowledge. You still have to have the awareness of what's going on when you delegate, but you don't need to do it yourself.
What are the challenges have you found?
In delegation?
No, in leadership.
Well, in leadership, of course, you want to lead a firm, which means that you want people to see it the same way you do, and you want people to help you fulfill your mission. But in order to get to the point where people are going to fulfill your mission, they have to want to do it. So I've always felt that what you need to do when you lead people is that you need to be in a position where they want the same thing that you want. That's when it really works, because you don't have to be always cracking the whip on people. If people are motivated towards the same goal that you are, they'll go to the ends of the earth, and you won't have to be actively motivating them the whole time, because they will self-motivate. So my ideal situation in leadership is where I have a team that naturally do the things that I want done because we want the same things and we're headed towards the same goal.
How do you do that?
Well, you have to have people who you think will be able to go on that journey with you. So you have to have the right people in the team. And if you don't have the right people in the team, you will not be able to achieve anything. So making sure that the most important decision that you make as a leader is who to have in your team. So, and you have to be good at making those choices. We all make mistakes at it. We always have to fix our mistakes in terms of selecting our teams. That's everybody. But you still need to have a good sense of whether the values of that employee or that potential employee or that manager that you're about to put on really align with your own values enough that they will likely go in the direction that you need them to do. And then you have to be also very clear to the people that you're leading where the company's going, where they're. Well, you have to tell them. You have to set a vision for the business, and then what you need them to do and what you need to do with them is to map on to that vision what their role is in achieving the overall vision.
And how often do you communicate that?
It should be pervasive in all of your communication. So I tend to live in the future anyway, which can actually be quite annoying for people because, you know, when you're really busy, to have someone like me come in and talk about the future and the way things are going to be like, and we really should be moving more in this direction, and I can see in 6 months that, you know, we're going to need to hire this type of person, and in 2 years we're going to be working with this type of client and so forth. That can be a little bit annoying for people who are very busy, and talking about change in the future makes people nervous as well. So it just has to be sort of worked into your, and even though, yes, I know I probably irritate people at times, but I think that you work it into your narrative all the time so that we're constantly talking about where we're going, how are we going, where are we going, how do we need to adjust course, how are your people going, you know, do you have the right people, do they have the right skills, you know, are we creating enough satisfaction with our clients as well to keep the business growing in order to, and in the areas where we want to work? And those sorts of questions you're asking all the time to your team.
Today's show is brought to you by our public courses, but we also do custom in-house programs. We do them in both Japanese and English. On the 27th of January, we'll run our next Step Up to Leadership. This is a one-day program. It's a great program for new leaders. You're suddenly promoted or going to be promoted, and your role will change. You've been a player, you've been a functional expert, you've done very, very well in your tasks for you as one individual. Now, you're responsible for a whole bunch of other people, and you've got to make sure that they're doing a good job. And you have no training for that. You have no help on that. It is thrown to the wolves. Good luck. I hope it works out. If it doesn't work out, then you probably get demoted or fired. Don't let that happen. Let's make it a great success. Let's make it a grand success. Let's get you into this one-day program, 27th of January, for Step Up to Leadership. Now, for something a bit more involved, now in May, we will hold the next version starting from the 19th of May, and it runs for 7 weeks, once a week, 7 weeks. The Leadership Training for Managers program. This is an excellent program. When you want to take your leadership level to a high level or a comprehensive level, or often in Japan, we're backfilling because leaders are often made leaders and given no real training, no real help, and left to their own devices to sort of work it out by trial and error. And there are many gaps, many gaps. But this is a program that fills those gaps in, gives people a really solid foundation to be a really excellent leader. That's the Leadership Training for Managers program. It's a 7-week-long program, once a week, 3.5 hours every week. Next one starting on the 19th of May, 2020. Now, our website is full. of useful resources, so you can check that out at enjapan.dalecarnegie.com. You can also email me at greg.story@dalecarnegie.com. If you like learning about watching videos, we've got truckloads of them, over 800, maybe more than 870 now. It's at our YouTube channel, Japan Dale Carnegie TV, and we release 2 TV shows every week on YouTube. The Cutting Edge Japan Business Show, that comes out on Mondays. That's a premiere business show in Japan. And Fridays, we have the Japan Business Mastery Show, a little bit of a shorter version. Don't forget to get my books, Japan Sales Mastery, that's the Bible for selling in Japan, and my new bestseller on how to master business in Japan, Japan Business Mastery. Delegation. What other challenges have you found as a leader in Japan?
I found it hard to. We have a very diverse team, so managing to the needs of Japanese people in your team and managing to the needs of international members in your team can be quite challenging.
What's the split?
We have probably maybe 20% of our team in Tokyo is foreigners. And some of them are in key roles as well. But managing to trying to create a single culture, a single company culture when you have people from different cultures. And of course, in any company, you have people from different kind of working cultures because you have operations people and you have client service people and data people and sales people and so forth. So it's hard in any organisation to knit together a culture, but achieving that across actual national cultures can be difficult as well. And
how do you do it?
I think there's got to be a lot of dialogue. There's got to be a lot of honesty. There are going to be issues that come up when Japanese manage foreigners, and there are going to be issues that come up when foreigners manage Japanese, and the same issues tend to come up. The values are different. So you have to have that dialogue. It has to be an honest dialogue. You have to be able to say, well, did you realize that, if the employee has a Japanese manager, did you realize in Japan these kinds of things are very important? And so that your behavior is maybe causing a reaction there that you don't intend, but, and then it goes in the other way as well. And then we have we have the same cross-cultural challenges with our clients as well, because we have foreign clients and we have Japanese clients. So does a Japanese client service person have the right skill set to work with a foreign client and vice versa? And so how do you pair people up? How do you work out who is internationally enough to work with an international client? Who is Japanese enough to work with a Japanese client? And so you're always really looking at people and their differences, and accounting for that and adjusting all the while you build a kind of shared dialogue. So we have 5 values, for example, that we call the Carter Way.
What are the 5 values?
Success thinking, respect for relationships, being proactive, excellence, and collaboration and teamwork are our 5 values.
And how do you drive those 5 values into the team?
So we have them up on the wall, as a lot of businesses do. But where I find them most useful is where there are problems. So when there's a problem with one of our staff, or there's a problem on a project, or there's an issue with a client, or there could be an interpersonal issue, whatever it is, usually it comes down to one of those 5 dimensions. So I use those 5 dimensions to diagnose problems, and I encourage the managers that work for me to use that as their framework to diagnose problems, and it works quite well. But for example, those values will come into conflict occasionally. So let's say if you have a underperformer in your team. Now, as a market research agency, the accuracy of what we deliver is paramount, especially if it's quantitative research, right? The numbers have to be correct. So if we have an executive working for us who can't get the numbers right, it's very, very frustrating. It's frustrating for the client. It's frustrating for the team. And it causes a lot of problems. Now, the temptation can be to get tough with those people or there are emotions involved when, because we believe in the excellence of what we do. So we have an excellence issue, but we need to deal with those issues in a respectful way. So the values give us some kind of guardrails that we can use to deal with issues, and the fact that they're non-negotiable helps as well. So we say, yes, excellence is non-negotiable, but respect is a non-negotiable as well. So let's say if we have a problem with someone's skills, or with someone's attention or whatever it is that's causing an excellence issue, then we need to deal with that in a respectful way so that it doesn't become abuse or power harassment or excessive criticism. It's not about diminishing the person's self-esteem. It's about dealing with an objective issue. You have the same sort of issues where you have people who are very excellent at what they do but are poor team players. So again, because teamwork's a non-negotiable, we insist that our people are able to play well together with each other and are not overly egotistical and don't upset people around them.
The 5 values, is that something you decided, okay, here are my 5 values for the company, or did you collectively come up with those 5 values? How did you arrive at those particular 5?
I decided them.
Okay.
They're my values. I believe they're shared with the team. I think that they're pretty usual kind of values to be talking about in a corporate setting. I think that the success thinking one is a little bit different. I think that's a personal one of mine. So I always want people to be thinking about how do I create a successful engagement with our clients, like that little plus alpha on top. It's not about just doing your job. It's about creating success for our client. It's about creating success for our team, success for the company, success for yourself. It just goes, it should filter through everything you do and the way that you think and the way that you approach every situation.
Are you finding that culture build is making you bulletproof in terms of retaining people and not losing them? Because there are 1.6 jobs out there for everyone looking for a job, and the whole market has moved in the last 5 to 10 years. So recruit right people in the right seats on the right bus type of idea on the recruiting side given. But the retention part, where there's a good culture, a strong culture that people like, that is such an attractive thing. They don't want to trade that for money somewhere else where it's a toxic culture or an unpleasant culture.
Yes.
So are you finding that culture, your 5 values, is helping you to retain the people you want to retain, or is not doing that?
I think it helps, but our goal would never be 100% retention anyway. I think it's good to have some turnover in your team. We don't have high turnover in our team, but it's natural for people to want to move on. And that also creates opportunities for people in the team as well. So a team and a company where the personnel never change is not necessarily a healthy business. I think there are people that leave realize that they may be wanting something different than what the company has to offer, or sometimes they just get a really great opportunity. And I'll always say to them, if I think it's a really good opportunity, congratulations, go for it. We want to obviously be friends well into the future, but if people get a genuine opportunity, I think that's great, and I want to encourage them to do that. But basically, yes, having a cohesive team that kind of knows, has some kind of tools in the toolkit in terms of how to manage problems and can create, common conversations around issues, I think really helps. And it makes the job also more satisfactory when people are there as well.
When companies here run engagement surveys, often Japan's basic average engagement scores are pretty low compared to other countries. But in your company, the irony is you're probably helping other companies do scoring, and you often don't apply it to yourselves because of scale. But in terms of not so much the engagement survey results, but how do you help people to become engaged in their work here to get the bottom line result, which is high levels of accountability, high levels of responsibility, really that success, thinking about the client success, to get those levels. How do you inculcate that?
Well, it has to pervade everything you do. So one of the key, just going back a bit, one of the key characteristics of a good researcher is that they're curious people. So, and when you're a curious person, you care about the outcome. You care about the answer. You also care that your client is actually able to use that insight that you've created and co-created with the client often. So you need people that are curious and motivated and interested and kind of want to make a difference. And so they tend to have very good interactions with clients because clients can tell very quickly whether you are genuinely interested in their project or not. And so clients respond to the passion that they sense in their client service team.
Okay, so
and I measure client satisfaction too.
Okay.
So every single project we do, we send out a very brief satisfaction questionnaire, and I see all of those data as they come in, and we share that, of course. And we use that to improve. More often than not, we use it to congratulate the team because generally they're very good at what they do.
So how do you instill that idea of I have got passion for this project and I'm going to exude that passion with the client? How do you get that happening?
Well, you lead by example. So from, in my actions, let's say if I am talking about a project or if I'm talking to a client, I show a lot of enthusiasm. So when we have our weekend meetings, when we do our weekly meetings, I'm an enthusiastic participant and leader in those meetings. And so I show a lot of interest in what the team is doing. I ask them what they're doing. How did it go with that client? How did they respond? Were they happy? I'll often get feedback from clients as well, which I'll pass on to the team. So you have to show a lot of enthusiasm yourself. So you show enthusiasm about the work itself. You show enthusiasm about the client's problem. You show enthusiasm about the client themselves. So we're very aligned with our clients in terms of wanting them to be successful and quite passionate about that. So I have to show that passion. The other leaders in the business have to show that passion, and it kind of it pervades.
And how about things like another issue in Japan often is innovation.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a few cultural things around innovation. For example, if people are doing some sort of brainstorming activity, Japanese will defer if someone is older than them. They're unlikely to put forward their opinion because the older person should put their opinion first, or they should fit in with the older person's opinion. Or if they join the company, the senpai ahead of you, you should defer to your senpai who joined ahead of you and agree with what they say. Or if someone's a certain rank, you're a division chief. Well, obviously, your opinion is more important than mine. How do you get around that?
Well, there's more than one way of dragging opinions out of people as well. So you don't always have to do it in a group. You can do that one-on-one. I think when I'm trying to innovate or change something, it could be in the types of methodologies that we do with our clients. It could be in the way we manage our projects. There could be any number of things that I'm working on. But I do find it useful to have time one-on-one with people and just explain to them why I'm interested in taking on whatever that change is. What are their thoughts on it? They may not actually have a thought that they can bring to mind at the time that I first talk about it. They may want to go away and think about it, and then we can talk about it the next time. So I never put pressure on people to say, tell me what you think about this right now. It'll be more a case of, well, look, I'm thinking this, why don't you go away and have a think about it? Why don't you talk to some of your team? Let me know what concerns you might have about that. And then you build upon that. But like having one kind of whiz-bang session where you're going to have all of this creative sparks and, that's not really how it works in Japan. So, we can get better at that kind of stuff when people feel safe. And I'm not saying that it's completely impossible, but generally speaking, there's a whole lot of different ways of getting that buy-in from people.
One of the things here is Japan tends to be a mistake-free zone.
Mm-hmm.
And, mistakes are looked upon very, very harshly.
Mm-hmm.
The irony is, the innovative process, there's bound to be mistakes, there's bound to be problems, it's a messy process. But the culture doesn't seem to take that into account. They're expecting everything to be perfect.
So I have never punished anyone for a mistake.
Why is that?
Ever.
Why?
I think I have too much empathy given the times where I might have made mistakes, or, I think that it's quite inevitable that people mess things up from time to time, but it's why have they messed it up? If I feel that it's due to a lack of like if it's an emotional issue, then a lack of commitment or a bad attitude or so forth, that's another the issue. Maybe their skills aren't quite up to the level, or they don't match the role that they're in. But mistakes are something that we need to address, because if we do have problems in our processes, or we try something new and it doesn't work, we have to learn from that. So punishing people for mistakes is not the way that I do it. I think we need to have people not to be afraid. So I don't like to manage by fear.
Plenty of people do, though, don't they?
Yeah, I don't think it's effective, though. I think people still make mistakes even when they're afraid, or they probably make even more mistakes because they're afraid.
Well, they become ninja-like at hiding them, right?
Well, yes, yeah, exactly. So I think if people have problems, I want to hear about them, and I'm perfectly open to having those discussions with people about problems that they're having or things that went wrong, or more often than not, you can imagine people want to tell me about things that went right. But, some issues can become big issues, and you need to get involved in them occasionally. But just it's never about making the person feel diminished when you're dealing with a mistake. That they're usually mortified themselves. So there's no need to yell at them or humiliate them or anything like that. But we do need to be open about dealing with it, because excellence is one of our values. So you can't be excellent if you're making mistakes all the time.
So that's a very progressive view, I think. And I'm sure that encourages Japanese to come out of their comfort zone, because fear of mistakes drives them into that comfort zone. Don't try new things. Don't put your head above the parapet. Keep a low profile. Have you found that having that, don't punish people for mistakes, is a sort of encouragement, is a motivator for people to step up?
I think it makes for a more pleasant environment. I think people are still reticent to put their head above the parapet.
Even in your organisation?
In any case, yeah.
Why is that? I mean, what you've got here is a very unique culture, I think.
It's a case of making people feel protected. So people need to feel safe.
And yet they still are hesitant to put their head above the...
It's not just about mistake. Yeah, it's people's natural disposition usually. It doesn't matter whether they're Japanese or Australians or whatever they are. People tend to like to play it safe. But I think that when you make the cost of playing it safe clear to people, then they start to think of it a little bit differently. And people do need to be protected. They do need to feel protected. You need to protect your people, meaning that you don't punish them if something goes wrong, because ultimately I'm responsible for everything. So the way that I behave is that I'm responsible. So it's not finger pointing or anything like that. It's just, okay, something happened, let's fix it, let's not make a fuss about it, let's just work through it, and I've got your back. And I would like to think that the people in the organisation feel that I've got their back.
Oh. Well, that's a trust issue, isn't it? How do you build that trust?
I think you have to earn trust. I don't think you just receive trust.
Well, how do you earn it then?
Just by doing the right thing by people over an extended period of time. And then also you build a reputation as well. You can imagine in any organisation, people will talk about the leader. What type of person is he? Oh, you can't trust him, or, be careful what you say to him about X, Y, Z. So you need to be a trustworthy person. But that helped me hire people when I first started the business, because I believe that I had behaved in an honourable way with people in my first role in Japan. And if I hadn't done that, then I wouldn't have been able to hire the team that I was able to hire when I started my business, because people get a reputation. And who's going to take a bet on a 29-year-old Australian and leave a perfectly good job where they are now? So I think how you treat people, it means keeping your word. It's if you say you're going to do something, you need to do it. That doesn't mean that people are always going to agree with what you do, and people will get angry with you when you don't do what they think you should do. But I try to work on those things, being true to my word and following through on things that I say that I'm going to do, and looking out for people.
So, I've asked you a number of things about leadership. Is there something that I haven't asked you that I should have?
On that question of leadership, one thing I'm interested in is it different leading a small firm versus a large firm? So are those issues in management? So I lead a small firm where it's possible to have a personal relationship with the people that I work with. In a larger firm, how does that work? And then how do you convey the same sense of leadership in a large organisation versus a small organisation? I have found that the types of issues that I deal with have changed as the firm has got larger. So if it's 2 people working together, if it's 10 people working together, it's different when it's 20 people, it's different when it's 50, it's different when it's 70.
What's different?
And you're just dealing with different issues every day. Like, the nature of your decisions is different. The things that you worry about are different. And so that comes through, I think, in the way that you interact with people. So when you're in a small team, you're often leading project kind of stuff. When you're in a larger organisation, you're leading, more of a whole sort of battle group, if you like, and that's kind of different. And in some ways, the things that you need to be focusing on when you're a leader in a small team, which is more like, the details of what's going on, are different from when it's a larger organisation. And then you're really talking about strategy and the future and things of that nature. So I'm on that journey myself. That's kind of what I'm experiencing, as that transition in leading a small team to how do you lead a larger team, and how do you lead a larger company, and what are the problems that you have as a leader as a company grows. Those problems are different than when you're smaller.
And if you were giving some advice to someone who's new to Japan, they've been sent by their company, like you were, okay, Dominic, go to Japan and make hay over there. What would be a couple of pieces of advice, say 2 or 3 pieces of advice you'd give a new person to Japan from a leadership perspective? What should they be doing?
Well, I think you need to be true. You need to be true to yourself. So I think it's quite important that you have a clear point of view on where you want to take your team if you're a leader, but you also have to have a team that will follow you. So you need to ensure that you don't fall out of rapport with your team through the process of encouraging them to go in the direction that you want them to go. So the communication tools and methods that you use at home probably won't work in Japan. And so you need to be quite patient, and you need to take that time to really align with your people. And that takes a lot of communication, it takes a lot of consistency, and you need to obviously be the type of person to them who's someone that they would want to follow. Otherwise, people will not follow you. And then those that clearly don't appear as if they're cooperating, then you need to get rid of those people. So you need not to be afraid to make the decisions that people tell you that you can't do in Japan, like let people go and so forth. If you do have people in your team who are clearly not aligned with you, who don't want to go in the same direction as you do, you need to make sure that you remove them from your team and replace them with people who will follow you. If you fail to do that, you could do all of the rapport building in the world. You could have all of the passion that you like. You could have all of the correct strategy, but if you've got people in your team who aren't going to go along with you on that journey, you need to do something about that. So you need the courage to be able to act when it becomes necessary.
Are they likely to sabotage?
I think they can in any situation, but I think it's particularly important that you're able to have a point of view on who really is supportive of what you're doing. It's quite possible for people to give feedback that isn't what you want to hear. That doesn't mean that they're disloyal. So you need to be able to tell the difference in that respect. So there's a lot of reading of people and situations that you need to do. And of course, in Japan, a lot of that is not directly verbalized as well. So, sometimes you need to ask the opinion of other people around you. But in general, time and time again, I've seen leaders flounder here when they attempt to carry on with teams that aren't aligned with what they want to do, and in many cases are actively working against them. So, there needs to be some courage in terms of those decisions. But assuming that you've got a team that's basically oriented in the same direction as you do, yes, there's a lot of communication required, rapport and trust that needs to be given to people. And as I mentioned at the beginning of our chat as well, I think people have a lot of wisdom in terms of how things need to be done in Japan. So us coming in and trying to tell people how to do things will often run against their sense of what common sense actually is. So it's important that you kind of restrict your role in terms of what it really needs to be, which is setting the coordinates and the overall destination. But like how they achieve that is something that you need to give them the trust that they do. And then of course people feel perhaps less threatened or less kind of put upon, and it tends to work better if you've got the right people.
Well, this has been a fascinating journey of leadership, from Dom starting the company on his own, one person, to building it up over how many years now?
16 years now.
16 years, to 70 people, 100 part-time staff, taking on big contracts with some big name players and building the revenues of the company to such a large extent. So there are a lot of lessons. I like many things that Dom said here about how to handle mistakes, people's keeping face, how you need to communicate with people, which are really good lessons for all of us to remember. So it's been a very valuable exercise today to hear Dom's personal experience, because he's done it from the ground up. And that's something that I think is rather unique. There are not that many people who've done it that way, so it's been very valuable. So Dom, thank you very much.
Thank you, Greg,
for sharing your thoughts today. We appreciate it. Well, thank you for watching this episode of Japan's Top Business Interviews, and we look forward for you to join us for our next interview coming up shortly. Thank you. Thank you for joining the Leadership Japan series. If you found the program useful, then tell your family, friends, and colleagues. Don't forget to rate, review, subscribe, and share this podcast. You can contact me at greg.story@dalecarnegie.com. Lots of great stuff on our website, injapan.dalecarnegie.com. Until the next episode, take what you thought valuable, put it into action, because idea application is what makes winners winners. So be one of them. Remember, I'm your corporate coaching and training guy here in Japan, ready to help you grow your business.